the consideration is the longer I cut, I'm missing out on strength gains.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like the kind of bro inside me start to see a little bit of extra leanness and is thinking like, I can keep going with this. Yeah.
And I understand the inner bro. I think you need to...
Is that a blue drink? Blue glass?
Blue glass, yeah.
Right.
So you're training like a bastard at the moment as well, so that's something to bear in mind. Adding calories very slowly. 100 calories a week is quite rapid though.
Day.
As in, yeah, sorry.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100 calories a day per week.
No, I wasn't going to do that every week.
Fine. And then in a year you'll be at like 10,000 and will be...
Obviously I'd stop. 7 weeks now cutting. And the competition is in Feb, March, April, May. 12 weeks.
Qualifier. And then Nationals is in October again.
I'm already qualified, yeah. I'm already qualified. I'd quite like the deadlift record though.
In 12 weeks.
It's only 300 kilos. Like I should have had 300 kilos multiple times last year. Yeah, but then so all I need to do then is get my total for nationals up by 10 kilos by ramping calories up. And before we know it, I may be going back to worlds again.
I've just typed in Owen Hubbard's current total using his best lifts.
780.
Yeah.
He just squatted 275 or something, or 277.
In that case, then it's 787.
And then Brett Gibbs dips him in yogurt and wipes him all over the table, doesn't he?
You fucking bastard! Very Australian aggressive.
Yeah, he's... Is that an established thing people do? Just such a vanilla thing to dip someone in as well.
Just really annoying. Imagine being dipped in yogurt and having to get on with the rest of your day.
Oh, it wouldn't come out in the shower and be awful.
Are you recording this, by the way?
Yeah.
As long as just don't put anything in that's incriminating, makes you seem weird.
Okay.
I'm sure you'll probably put this bit in.
I'll cut out all of the racist, homophobic stuff that we've just been discussing, and that was
Right.
a joke, by the way, guys. We're not racist or homophobic.
Well, I'm not.
Well.
What podcast is it?
It is 27 or 28?
Episode 20. I'm going to run out of breath before I see the number. 27. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Propane Fitness Podcast, episode 27. So it's just Yusef and I here today. We don't have any guests. And we are just going to answer some questions that we've been asked through the various channels that we collect questions from. So before we get started, just to remind you, I know we discussed it. We forgot to mention it last time, but we discussed it at the podcast before, that we are now posting every week with the podcast the show notes to what we discuss. We tend to get questions from people after we've done the podcast saying, I know you mentioned this thing, but do you have a link for it? So we've solved that problem for you. Every week on the main site, we'll be posting show notes, links to anything we discuss, and an opportunity as well to get on our email list so you get notified when we do post a podcast, because we know that you obviously love us that much. So Yusuf's here as well, just sitting quiet.
Guys. So yeah, do keep the questions coming as well. We enjoy answering them, and it gives us some good stuff to talk about too.
Well, we'll put a link on the show notes for people to ask questions as well, if they are interested in doing that.
And also, if you're a member of our exclusive Inner Circle subscriber list and you get our emails, then just reply to any of the emails that we send, and we will either answer you there and then, or if it's a longer answer question, then we'll do a podcast about it.
We will indeed. So today's topic is surrounding the Masters athlete, and how some of our readers, I guess, believe that is a... Were you about to say something?
Yeah, so this is a question from Patrick O'Brien.
Okay.
So he's been doing the protocol for a while, got some great results, and he said that the Masters athlete is completely underserved in terms of online fitness, and just wants to know how you can adapt your training and diet to match the older gentleman or lady. So, in terms of volume, recovery, and how much is too much, and do you need to adjust things like recommended calories and things like that? Jonny, you're looking quizzical.
I'm looking quizzical because on my laptop I have at the top right-hand corner our Twitter feed, and somebody just posted something that confused me. So I look confused. So we should probably define a Masters athlete first, shouldn't we?
So, well, there's the IPF definition, and then there's kind of the colloquial just older person, which is the older, wiser, and better human.
I think in general, I think there are other federations that have a Masters classification. It's not just the IPF. Just for the sake of, so that this is the sort of thing that if you get it wrong, we'd get people making fun of us. So, according to Wikipedia, Masters athletics would start at 35. I was under the impression that the IPF Masters started at 40.
Yeah, me too. But maybe that changes for different lifters.
Yeah,
I guess different lifters, different sports.
Are you old at 35? No, you've got to wait till you're 40. I think the general idea is that, I think once you are late 30s, moving into your 40s, your ability to recover and deal with the same loads and stresses you were placing on your body when you were 20 years younger is significantly reduced. And that's why, obviously, if you put a junior lifter against a Masters lifter, unless the Masters lifter is an absolute beast, the junior lifter is likely to have a lot of advantages. And federations and different sports are all about kind of making it a level playing field, aren't they? So that's the reason for the Masters classification, I guess. So we'll chat about what things we think you would look to change in your training, beginning with, I suppose, setting up a training plan. So we're going to have to make some assumptions here, aren't we? So let's say somebody is 40 years old, for simplicity, and they are trying to get stronger. I think losing fat is probably a different topic, but there's less going on with just a diet rather than a training program. So I think the things to consider are that volume, intensity, and frequency are all inherently related to one another, and you cannot look at them in isolation, because if you change, let's say you're training 3 days a week and you increase your frequency by training 4 days a week and don't adjust the volume of the other days, you are inherently increasing frequency and volume. And then if you increase intensity, you will probably also have to decrease volume, because you cannot perform the same volume at higher intensities. So what do those terms mean? Well, volume is typically described as sets times reps. And then your volume load or tonnage would be sets times reps times load. Intensity is usually described as a percentage. So that would be 90% of your 1 rep max, for example. Some people refer to it as an RPE, so how many reps you had left at the end of the set. And then frequency is just how many times you train either a muscle group or a movement pattern in the week. So how many times you'd squat, how many times you bench, how many times you train arms, whatever it might be, or how many times you do a backflip if you're Yusef. So I guess the thing to realize with that is that all of those things have an inherent effect on your stress, your total training stress, and then your ability to recover from that. So as somebody's aging, the thing that I would probably seek to reduce the most would be how often you touch high percentages of your 1RM, because things like your ability to recover in terms of just general soft tissue, as well as neurally, hormonally, and muscularly. Is that a word?
Muscularly. I don't
Muscularly. Sounds wrong. Your ability to recover in kind of all aspects is reduced, and typically higher percentages tend to place a greater stress on those structures. So I would look at something like a rep progression scheme that generally doesn't take you over 80% that often. So something like 5x5 leading into, or like 3x8, 4x6, 5x5 deload repeat, something like that. And then also changing how often you squat, because again, that's going to have an inherent, if you squat every day, that's a great demand on the hips, the knees, the back. So reducing your squat frequency to something like once a week, twice a week at most. That would be my kind of initial thoughts. And I'm not letting Yusef speak. So
No,
Yusef, do you want to?
That's a good intro to that. So yeah, we've got some stuff on
Intro.
how to.
That's all I've got.
That's all you've got. Oh, I've got reams. This is that's a good overview of the volume does need to be adapted to match that change in recovery capacity. Particularly if you are training with a powerlifting focus, we can look at the differences. For example, a program that we like to use if someone's looking to improve their squat is the Russian Masters program. Now, there is a Russian squat routine and a Russian Masters program, which are both based around the same concept, but the regular person Russian program is squatting 3 times a week. Regular Russian man squats 3 times a week. The older Russian man, the mature Russian gentleman, squats twice a week. And that's just to match that difference in recovery capacity. So talk a little bit. Sorry, go ahead.
Is the Russian Masters program 9 weeks and the Russian squat routine 6 weeks?
I think they're both 8 weeks, but they
wrong, completely wrong. Brilliant.
But there's,
Okay.
I'm sure there's variations of it. So
Okay.
it may not. Yeah, and ultimately there is less frequency and less total volume load for the Masters athlete. Now, the reason for that, if we look at what happens as you get older, there are a decline in a lot of androgens, there are hormonal changes, reduction in growth factors and growth hormone, the tissue turnover rate reduces, and also metabolic rate will decline gradually. Now, the difference between an older person who's starting training compared to if you start training between the ages of 16 and 20 particularly, where you're basically on a natural steroid cycle, and the hormonal change that you go through during puberty is insane. And it's something that I think both of us really regret not eating more when we were younger, because just absolutely taking advantage of being on an endogenous steroid cycle and then having to try and scrape those gains once you pass that window of gains. So that's a big factor. And then once you hit 25, your hormone levels really start to stabilize. And as you grow older, you reach sort of 40 years old, the andropause kicks in, which is similar to the menopause for men, reduction in testosterone. However, the good news is that resistance training offsets that reduction in testosterone. So those are the changes that happen. The other thing is also, because your tissue turnover rate is reduced, things like connective tissue are also slowed in terms of their recovery. And so recovering from injury can take longer. However, it's not all bad news, because a lot of the time you get older lifters that are stronger than their younger equivalents in their weight category, and that's partly because they've just had more time under the bar. They've managed to hone their skill better, and they've developed the technical maturity through accumulating more volume over their life. So that's from a powerlifting perspective. Anything to add, Jonny?
It just reminds me of when I was at Worlds. Just dropping that in there. I was in the warm-up room, and there was So for people who follow powerlifting, if you imagine this lineup, so there was Lane Norton, Christoph, where's your Bicky, whatever he's called, who wins everything.
Where is his Bicky? I don't think
anybody knows. I don't think he's hiding it somewhere. He's hiding it from everyone and deadlifting 375 as a result. Like LS McLean, plus a load of like Bulgarians and Russians and ridiculous people. And then on the squat rack in the middle was a very small, elderly Chinese lady. Nobody knew how she'd found her way into the warm-up room for the IPF Worlds. She wasn't on a team, but she was squatting for technique, like smooth up and down, 170 for sets of 5. Now, this lady mustn't have weighed more than 60 kilos, but her technique was flawless. So you've got the coaches from various countries, powerlifting coaches, who are like jaw dropped at this old lady. And so it's a perfect example of somebody who, kind of had every factor against her. She was clearly, I would say, I'm guessing, nearing 50. So probably not elderly. I should probably rephrase that. Nearing 50, very thin, had the kind of an old set of squat shoes on and what looked like medical bandages around her knees rather than like the SBD head-to-toe kit, but was making over double her body weight look like a joke. So that's an example of somebody who's acquired over time a very particular set of skills that make her very, very proficient at moving weight up and down through space.
I love that story.
Yeah.
Just the looks that you get when you don't fit the bill of just sort of grooving 200 kilo squat and just as a bit of a light practice.
It's a joke.
Now that's actually, if you guys have read my article from this week, which is titled "Can You Gain Muscle in a Calorie Deficit?" That's something that I mention, and if there is any demand for it, I can start doing audio versions of the articles that we write if you can't be bothered to read them. But so one of the things that we mentioned is using age and gender as a kind of implicit limitation before you start. And this is often the fault of the trainers or the industry or the general infrastructure that tells you that women are somehow limited, or that if you're older you can't make the same gains. And that can actually be quite insidious, because then it starts to affect people's attitude from the outset and limit their reference point and what they feel that they can achieve. So an example that I used in the article is one of our clients called Sophie, who, when she started out training, she just asked me for some advice. She was like, "Yusef, can you take me to the gym one day? I want to get stronger." And so she trained with me, and because I was her only reference point and I was deadlifting 240 or whatever, then she was like, "Well, why can't I do that as well?" So as a result, she didn't have anyone telling her, "Oh, you're a woman, so you can't lift as much," and whatever. And as a result, she ended up, I think she deadlifted 155. Is that right, Jonny? 165 at nationals.
But yeah.
And benched 80. So
she was seeded like top 10 in the country, I think, of female powerlifters on Wilks.
Pretty good.
So.
Now, you could argue that she would have achieved that anyway, but with a lot of my other female clients, something that I've seen is that there's an artificial gender-bound limitation that's already applied on them, of people telling them, "You're a woman, so you're never going to be as strong as a man, and you shouldn't lift heavy, because for some reason your body doesn't work in the same way as a man's when it comes to lifting a weight," which is ludicrous. Similar with some of our older clients, that they don't have this idea that they're limited because they're older, and as a result, their mindset is shifted, and they're able to achieve that without to just bat out any kind of concepts,
So
any limitations.
one of those people is called Colin. If you're listening, hi Colin. But I'll just read. Of the past 3 days, he's made a couple of posts on our private Facebook group, and to quote, "From nowhere, after 3 weeks of really struggling, bench press PB, 1 rep max of 95 kilos, which for Colin is a big jump. And this is incidentally while he's dropping into the leanest state he's ever been in for his entire life, I believe.
What's his body weight at, Johnny?
That is a good question. You really put me on the spot there.
I think he's 71.
It's something like that, yeah.
So that is a 1.34 body weight bench.
God, that's really good, isn't it? I don't know what it was. Yeah, so he's another example of someone who he sees the photos of our younger clients. Actually, you know what? He's lighter than that. He weighed 70 kilos this week. Just checking.
Right. He does chin-ups with 30 kilos around his waist as well. So
yeah.
It's not just a bench.
He sees some of our younger clients and kind of the strength results they have and the progress they make. And every week he kind of tells me how that's going to be him next. So it's more the attitude that he has of not, I'm a bit older than some of the other guys, and that's a limitation. It's I'm a bit older than the other guys, and I'm going to show them. And that's, that it's what Yusef alluded to in his article, that a lot of it is mindset driven rather than process driven. We haven't given Colin a special program. He's in fact following a very, very similar. We have another client called Matt, who made some fantastic progress. You may have seen some photos of him. And both him and Colin followed the same underlying theme for the progression model that they're both using. And both have made very similar progress on it as in terms of percentages of their maxes, both while losing weight. So Colin just forgot about the fact that he should, in theory, be able to make less progress, and that's, I think, one of the main reasons that he's been able to make the progress that he made. So I guess we'll wrap up then with some recommendations, even though I kind of... Oh, go on.
There is just to round up the perspectives. We've a lot of this has been quite powerlifting focused, but the same thing applies for bodybuilding in terms of ability to recover from a certain amount of volume, which is the primary determinant of muscle gain, muscle size gain, and also with fat loss. Fat loss is really the only thing that I think is going to be a slight hindrance. However, as your basal metabolic rate drops, so will your appetite. So it's not going to be a huge problem. All you can do and all you need to do is adjust the calorie calculators based on your age, and if you're not losing weight, the same rules apply. Still need to drop or increase based on what your body weight is doing. Anything to add?
Yeah, just to touch on both of those things, I think the reason that we discuss it from a powerlifting perspective is just that when you're working with, obviously volume is not the only cause of muscle growth, but it's probably the biggest indicator that we can measure and adjust. Now, if somebody's training for powerlifting, for example, or training for 1 rep max strength, or training for hypertrophy specifically, the only real difference that we'd see in that is where their rep range lies. It's more efficient to get more volume in at a higher rep range if you're just pursuing hypertrophy and don't have a specific need for a 1RM development. But we'd still be tracking, regardless of whether somebody is a bodybuilder or a powerlifter, we'd still be looking at their total volume, frequency, and intensity over time and looking to modulate them to manage recovery. With regards to the fat loss, I'll discuss what we did with Colin because he's been losing fat for a while now. When I work with somebody who is of a population that, as Yusef says, you'd expect from the data their starting point to be a little bit different, I would factor that into the initial calculation. And then the only thing that I really saw with Colin that would be different to, say, again, Matt, as another example, would be the speed at which we were able to kind of find the point at which Colin could sustainably lose fat. We had to take his calories slightly lower, as to be expected, but coincidentally, or is it coincidentally? Doesn't matter. But Colin complained of hunger much less than Matt did. So Colin experienced much less in the way of kind of the standard effects of dieting, despite the fact that his calories got to below 2,000 towards the end of the diet. So that mirrors
advantage, really.
It is, yeah. And it mirrors what you were saying about kind of hunger signals in satiety adjusting with your base metabolic rate as well.
So the key thing there is just tracking really for everything, isn't it? I guess to
it
make
is,
sure
yeah.
that all of these variables are tracked. You guys may have seen Sorry.
We harp on about this. I think when we get questions that come down to like I'm stuck in a position and I don't know what to do, typically the best way to get a handle on that position is to get a really clear picture of where you are numerically. So if Colin had tried to lose weight by just reading articles online about training for the older guy, for example, and like read the evidence that says that his metabolism might be slower, he'd probably just moved his calories all around the place, tried low carb, tried paleo, and you kind of go for the magic bullet when things tend to stagnate. What we had was months of data that plotted the trend in his rate of weight change and his average calories over time. And using that information, we were able to adjust some variables in his diet and in his training to allow us to reach a sustainable fat loss phase. And I know we've talked about Colin a lot, but we actually got him to the point where I bumped his calories up to maintenance for a week. So we added probably nearly 800 or 1,000 calories to his daily intake, and his weight continued to fall. And that's just an example of what you're able to achieve if you really fine-tune things, using data to drive decisions rather than just guessing. So tracking is the thing. If you're not doing that, is crucial.
And the advantage there as well is that because Colin was being treated like anyone else and didn't have lowered expectations of what was achievable, he ended up going for gold, which is fantastic. Done,
Colin.
Yeah, well done, Colin, and all of our other Masters athletes. If you follow our YouTube channel as well, you may have seen a video of me recently saying, answering the question of what happens when you stop training. And I just made a reference there to people that, as they get older, they gain a lot of weight quite suddenly. Now, yes, there is a slight decline in metabolic rate, but it's not dramatic and it is gradual. So people often keep the same eating habits, and as their metabolic rate drops, they stop activity, which probably accounts for another 400 to 600 calories. And so really, in my opinion, that's behavioral more than physiological, and that's just something that would be fixed once again by tracking.
I agree. Yeah, and you as well talked about, I think a question that some of the older guys get is, like, especially if they've trained when they were younger, is they're told all the time that their muscle's going to turn to fat. And that's something else that or is that the video you're alluding to?
Yeah, sorry, that was it. It was don't let muscle turn to fat. Yeah, not what happens when you stop training. That's still in the pipeline.
I was going to say, I thought, like, as he released this video today. So I think back to, if you're in this position, what to do now. I would still say, back to what I said at the beginning, I would steer away from super high frequency or super high intensity programs. So anything like squat every day, or even things that involve you regularly testing your strength rather than building it. 5-3-1 is even an example of that. To a degree, it's a little bit different. But if you find the program is calling for frequent maxing, or frequent heavy triples or lower, I would consider moving to something a little less intense. And I would also consider probably not straying over squatting twice a week, just because, as we've discussed, things like tendons, ligaments, and joints don't have the ability to recover or deal with that level of stress that you would have had 20 years prior. So something like 5x5 or the progression model that I mentioned, and staying between 70 and 80% for most of the training would probably be where I'd go. And then back to what we were saying, track everything, get a real handle on the numbers, learn where you are, and then make evidence-based, data-driven changes, not just what seems like it might be a good idea.
Okay, guys, hopefully we've answered that one.